All right, guys, we are going to take a look at your next assignment where you get to actually control the camera. And there are going to be two aspects of the camera that you are going to work to control. So that means that this is going to be worth 2 badges. You get your choice over which one you want to work on first. We're going to look at aperture and shutter speed and the ISO, and all those three together are what photographers call the exposure triangle, because when you manipulate one of those 3 elements, you have to control the other 2 so that the exposure on your images is correct. So this is a sheet that I'm going to give all of you to kind of help you when you are doing your work. This really involves a lot of planning if you are a photographer in order to get the image that you want. So we're going to look at all 3 of these. So if you look at the bottom section, that's the ISO. This is not something that we are really going to work on controlling because the camera does a much better job of deciding which ISO number to use or what value to use when it's taking your images. Basically what the ISO does is it controls how much noise or distortion is included in your image. So if you remember from before, noise is all the little dust particles or granulars that are in the background image. So you see the lower the number, the less distortion, the less noise that you get, the higher the number goes, the more distortion you get. And I'll show you some examples of that here in just a minute. One of the things you will control is shutter speed. So this is basically a timer for how long the shutter will stay open. And this allows you to control for blur for objects that are in motion. So the faster your shutter speed, the more clear a moving object is. Sometimes you actually do want blur in your images, so you want a much slower shutter speed. And then there's aperture. So if you remember from your research, aperture is how much light is lit into the camera. So the diaphragm will adjust. The larger it is, the more light comes through. And of course, the smaller it is, less light comes through. And depending on how much light you lit in for your focus will determine whether you have foreground or background that is in focus. So let's go ahead and take a look at ISO. So here are 5 different settings, and this one shows 4 of those ISO values. And you can see that not only does it have distortion, but light. So it kind of works with aperture. So the higher the ISO number you get, the more light comes in through the sensor. But you also want to use aperture along with this to control the distortion that you get in the your actual image. So again, we're not going to control ISO. We're going to let the camera decide what is the best ISO for your images. So aperture is one of the ones that we will control. So over here on your mode dial, when it is time for you to work on this badge, you want to make sure that the mode dial is set to aperture priority mode. So that's AV. Okay? So make sure the dial is set for there, and then that allows you to actually control what aperture size you want. Now, you notice these F's that are in front of it. The F's stand for an f-stop, or that's what the photographers will call it. They call them f-stops. And so for every stop, it is a value that is placed. And this is kind of backwards, and this is why it's confusing. The larger the number, the smaller the diameter of your aperture. So if an f-stop of 16 is a really really small diameter value, and an f-stop of 2.8 is a large diameter that gets lots of light come in. So the aperture is going to help you with controlling 2 aspects. Light exposure, so kind of like the ISO, where the larger the diameter, smaller the f-stop, the more light you get. And you can see through these images an example of how less light comes in, the larger the f-stop number. And that makes sense. The smaller the hole, the less light you're letting come in. So here's another example of an actual footage. So we have that where it looks washed out. So this is an overexposed image because there's too much light that came in. And over here is an underexposed image because there was too little light that came in. So this one here, kind of like Goldilocks, too cold, too hot. This one's right in the middle, perfect. So they used a medium aperture to get the right amount of light to come in. But the thing that I love to work with on Aperture is your depth of field. So looking at these same images here, when you have a larger diameter, so a smaller f-stop, and then a smaller diameter, larger f-stop, you can see the difference in your depth of field. So this one here with the aperture is really small. The size is small, the f-stop number is large. You can see that everything is nice and clear. But over here, when you modify your f-stop so that you have a larger diaphragm, then you have the foreground is what is in focus and the background is out of focus. So here, same thing. This is where you have a larger f-stop, which makes for a smaller diaphragm hole. And then this one here has the foreground is what is in focus and the background is out of focus. And in order to do that, you use a smaller f-stop value. Same over here. So we're able to get some of this background in focus, and over here we get more of the blur of the lights, and then this part here is what's in focus. Here's another example. So same subject with a smaller aperture, we get all of it in focus. And this one here with the larger aperture, we get a little bit more blur on that background there. So it's really confusing, and it takes a long time for photographers to actually know how to adjust their aspects to get it the way that they want. So for your assignment, you're really just going to be experimenting and taking different images with the different aperture values. So here's some artwork that you can actually create when you're able to adjust the aperture. So you see this is all in focus. This one here, they purposely wanted it to be the section of here out of focus to get the what they call bokeh or bokeh, depending on how you pronounce it. But those are those little light orbs that you see. You can see them over here as well. So we have this one, the motorcycle is in focus, and this is all in the background is out of focus. This one here, same, so a small depth of field because we don't get all of this in focus, it's just what's in the foreground is. All right, now for shutter speed. I think you guys are gonna really have fun with this as part of the assignment. So with shutter speed, in order to control it, you want your dial to be in shutter priority, which is TV. Okay, yes, I know, not TV that you watch, but TV stands for shutter priority on your mode dial. So this allows you to capture objects in motion, and depending on what you want your final image to be will determine how fast or slow you want your shutter speed to be. So if you have a super fast shutter speed, you can get something that is in motion and basically freeze what it is. Because things are moving so fast, the slower your shutter speed, the more blur you're going to get because the camera sensor isn't able to capture the entire movement. So here you see the medium and here is slow. So shutter speed also can be used to control brightness of your images. So the faster the shutter speed, the less light you're actually letting in because you're closing that shutter so fast, so it doesn't have a lot of opportunity to grab the light. The longer that shutter speed stays open, then the more light it's able to capture. So with blur control, you can see that 1/500th of a second is how long this image would stay, or this shutter would stay open in order to get a nice, crisp, clear image. And as we get to slower and slower times, the more blur that we're going to get for an object in motion. So here is some pinwheels, so you can actually see how long the shutter would stay open, what you're going to end up getting. So if it's only open for 1 second, it's going to be super fast. So it's able to just get that, or excuse me, super slow. So it's not able to get all the different details of this pinwheel. And then as we move, the faster it gets, the more details you're able to see. Same with this one here. So the slower it is, the more blur, faster it is, it's able to just get that snapshot in. So one of the things that I do suggest for this assignment is that you use the tripods. The reason why is because when you have your shutter open for a long time and you're standing there and holding it, it's going to end up getting movement from you moving, because it's hard for you to stand perfectly still. So with the tripod, you're able to position everything the way that you want, snap that shutter, give it the time to work. You want to move away, not bump it, and then it's able to capture those images. So here are just some examples. This is a quarter that somebody spun, and they were able to get the image, 3 different images of it. Water is cool to use your shutter speed to control it, because you can see the differences that you get with how the water looks. And then this is somebody moving. Obviously it's set up so that it was able to take images, several sequential images as this person was running through. But I want you to think about how you can capture movement images while we're here at the Innovation Center. So you could use a coin. I'm going to have lots of different things for you, props for you to use to set up. We could try to get water and spill water. We can use the water fountain. We can get somebody running, somebody jumping. I'm going to have a jump rope. I'm going to have little bouncy balls. So think about how you can take artistic images and capturing different types of movement. So here's some different art that was used with manipulating the shutter speed. So this one has kid have snow falling on top of him. Here we have the windmill, then we've got a waterfall, and then here are some other cool images here. So when you do want that blur, so getting a street with the cars moving, you get all the lights flashing through. This one obviously had to have a super fast shutter speed in order to capture a hummingbird perfectly still with the water droplets. Notice the background is blurred, so that means that the focus was on the foreground and not the background. So this probably had a large aperture in order to accomplish that at the same time that they had a fast shutter speed. And same with this image here. So this was a ball that was wet, that was thrown in a spinning motion, so you can see the water in a spiral coming off there. Again, they would have had to have used a super fast shutter speed in order to capture that image. This one here, they would have used a slower shutter speed in order to control for that blur. So think about what you want to create with your artwork, and the assignment details are all in Canvas ready for you to look at. Just let me know. You will need to work with a partner or in a group for these assignments. So have fun. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.